So this is going to be a short introduction to using the video timeline in Photoshop, which allows you to both use keyframes and use what we call tweening. So we're going to start by creating a new file, and we're going to use the YouTube video standard. So if you wanted to put your videos up on YouTube, this would be the selection that you would choose, which is 920 by 1080 pixels. So we're going to select that. When it comes up on the screen, you'll see there are a number of blue areas. Outside of this is what we call a safe area. Okay, so different video systems, etc., will allow you areas that might clip off the corner of your film, etc., etc. So video, when you're working with film and video, you work with what we call a safe area. So I don't want to dwell too much upon that. Just now, we really want to get stuck in and look at the actual way of animating in Photoshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a layer. I'm just going to turn off the timeline for now. And I'm going to create a layer. I'm just going to draw a square in this bottom left-hand corner of the layer using the rectangle tool, and I'm going to start by drawing it in pixels. Okay, so that's drawn there. Now then, when we animate in Photoshop, it helps if we converted the layer to what we call a smart object. So I'm going to do that to start with, and then maybe start to explain what a smart object is. So convert to smart object. Now then, that's been converted. You can see that I can't now go and fill or do anything with that, because what it's created is an external file. So if I double click on this, you'll see now the editing file has come up onto the screen, and you'll see it's an additional file. Okay, what this is doing, it's allowing you to make any changes inside the main document, but have a master file in the background. So that's what's going on there. They're called smart objects. Okay, so once we've got our smart object, I'm going to go up and I'm going to go and get my timeline open, and I'm going to make sure that I create a video timeline. So there's my video timeline ready to go. Here is the file, or the motion over time. So we've got it by default set up as 1 second of time, 2 seconds of time, 3 seconds of time, 4, 5, etc., etc. So that's what we call the timeline. In there, we've got your usual sort of video controls, and we can zoom in and out of that timeline in this way. Okay. What you've used in the past, or what we've used in the past, is the animation option, which is down here, and you can see you can create cell animations, and we've used that in the past, but we're interested now in the video timeline, because what the video timeline is going to give us is the option to put in keyframes. So you can see down here, I've dropped down this list here, and we've got an option to transform. We can change the opacity, and there's and we can work with the style. Okay, we're going to primarily work just with the transform in this particular video, because that's your kind of introduction. But the thing to realize is that it's all linked up, the layers. So if I go and change that to where, you'll see that this has now changed. So that's really important, that we're working with these two layers. Now then, the reason for the smart object is that, let me just demonstrate, is that if I create another layer and go and create a circle on that layer. Okay, I've created a rounded square, doesn't really matter, it's doing the same thing. When I drop the options now for the way we animate, you'll see that only position is available there. So all we can do is change the position of this particular square. Okay, we can't rotate it, scale it, and basically we can't transform in any shape or form, which is why we're using the smart object down here. So if you look at the smart object, you can see that's got transform written there, and layer 1, which is our square with the rounded edges, has got position written there. I'm going to delete that because we're not going to be using that. Okay, we're going to be concentrating purely on transform, as you're going to see in a minute. So the first thing to get our head around is this idea of a keyframe. And in this example, we're going to want to put a keyframe in at the beginning, our starting position. So if we click on the little option here, you'll see that this little triangular, this little diamond shape appears here. There's our starting position. So what we do is we move the playback head across to the far side, because we're going to create our first animation. And then in here, we go and put in the second of the keyframes. Now, what this allows us to do is, if we go in and use our move tool and move our shape along, I'm using the shift key to constrain it to this point here. We should, if we look, have an animation, which we have. So now the square is moving from one side of the screen to the other. So what effectively is happening is that we're creating the first keyframe, and then we're creating the second keyframe, okay, and the two positions, and then the computer is filling what we call the in-between frames. And this is known as tweening. And that's pretty much your basic concept for all computer animation, using the tween. Whether it's 2D, 3D, doesn't matter what it is, creating keyframes and moving objects or transforming and changing the properties of an object between one frame and another and allowing the computer to fill in the bit in the middle is called tweening. And it's short for in-betweening, which is an old animation concept where you would have the keyframe animators working, the guys that would create the start and stop positions, and then you'd have the junior animators would come in and create all the frames and draw all the frames in between. Nowadays, if you're using a computer, the computer can do the tweening part of the job. Okay. So we've got that moving. So what else can we do with that? Now we've got that up and running. Well, what we can start to do is we can start to add a bit of variety, because we can create further keyframes. So maybe we'll go into the middle this time, and we'll put a keyframe in the middle, and we'll click on that. And this time we'll move that up to the top. Start that again. Let's move this into the middle. Add a keyframe, and I'm going to move that up the screen to the top there. And now what should happen is it'll animate up to the top and then animate back down to the bottom. Okay, so you can see how that's now changed. So we're putting in new keyframes and new positions. Because we got it on transform, we take it up to the top here. Because we've got it on the transform here, we can now go up and combine that with the transformation tool in Photoshop. So we're going to rotate, and I will rotate it. Okay, and click to set that. So now you can see that it's rotating up and rotating down, which is quite satisfying. It rotates up and it rotates down. Okay, So you can see that working. So let's now go and use the scale tool over here. So here we're going to go and get the scale. So we'll go up and make sure we're at the end there, and we'll go image, edit rather, transform scale, and I'll hit the shift key and I'll just enlarge that square up, and then I'll click to set that. So now when we animate, it's going to go up and then it's going to get bigger as it comes down. Okay, let's go and make a few more adjustments. Let's go and have a look at the timing that we're using at the moment. So in here we can adjust this and we can set the time frame rate. Obviously if you had it 1 frame a second, you would lose all movement. Okay, so what we're going to use is we're going to use a standard 24 frames per second. Okay, in this, so it's slightly quicker. There we go. So now that's working on 24 frames per second. Anything less than 6 frames per second stops the illusion of movement, and you end up with just it looking like it's a series of pictures being put up on the screen. So we need that continuous movement or continuous movement of frames to allow that illusion of movement. Okay, so what else can we do to tidy it up? Maybe if we extend this a little bit, and then when it gets to the end, it'll just sit there for a minute. Okay, so that's a little bit better. And then maybe we can move this over a little bit, so it just sits at the beginning a little bit. Maybe put this more in the middle of the animation. And now we've got something a little bit smoother happening with a start and stop at the beginning, which is a nice way of working. So really what we're looking at and the way we're working here is to say the fundamentals of many, many different types of animation programs. If you were to move into After Effects, for example, it's got a similar kind of system of layers and drop-down features. It's just a lot more complicated. This is just a great way to get your head around how the certainly the Adobe animation programs work, but also the idea of keyframes in general. So what we could do here is, I'm just going to move this up and give us a bit more space here for a minute, as I'm going to do something here whereby I could duplicate this layer and go and make a few changes. Okay, so now I've got a copy of that layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just zoom out a little bit, okay, and I'm going to shift this whole layer to there. So now what's happening is I've got the two repeating, which is not what I'm after. Okay, what I'm actually after is reversing it. So I'm going to move that keyframe over here, that keyframe over here. Now we should have, if this is all working nicely, a satisfying loop going on. Oops. Let's put that back on the screen. There we go, better. So now we've got a satisfying loop with the animation moving up and down. So this is now allowing you to edit, and you can put clips and layers together and compose something quite sophisticated now because of this. Because not only have you got the keyframing options, the ability to build different sections on different layers and assemble them, means although this is a very, very simple animation tool, it still allows for a huge amount of complexity and sophistication in what you're doing. And just back to that idea of the smart object. Okay, the smart object's on there. But what we can do now is if we double click here, I can go and change the color of the smart object. Need to save that to make that work. There we go. Let's go and get that working. There we go. So now we've got the smart objects. You can see that I can change the color in the original image. I mean, that's not hugely important to animating. It's just a unique feature of Photoshop and the way Photoshop likes to work. But as I say, you will come across that if you're following any video tutorials. It always keep going on about smart objects in terms of making these animations work. Finally, what we could do is output the animation, and you got a couple of options here. You can send it out as a H.265 video. This will send it out ready to go up onto YouTube, fully compressed. Don't want to go into video compression and all that just now, and there's plenty of time for that later, but that's one way you get it out as a video, and it's sending it out as an MP4, okay, which is a compressed video format that would say would be ideal for uploading to YouTube. Or you could send it out as a Photoshop image sequence should you want to create a GIF, and then assemble them either back into the Photoshop animation timeline and export as a GIF, or put into another GIF assembling program. So that would work just as well. Okay, we can convert this into using the frame-by-frame animation program, which is what it's doing at the moment. But my experience of that is, as you can see, is it working? Yeah, it's not working particularly well. It's losing the scaling. Yeah, so you can see that I don't think it's that successful in conversion, and that's only something really simple. So I'm not holding out any great hopes of being able to do much with that. You'd be better off exporting each individual frame. That way you keep the quality. Okay, so that's an intro to using the video timeline as an animation and keyframe animation tool.